can't believe you heard me. I mean, you can't believe you heard me hum.
What?
It was beautiful.
I was humming a tune, yeah, and I forgot he could hear me. So when I was
Mozart
walking,
himself would have wept.
I know. It's so bad. I'm telling you, it's so bad, so bad. And on the topics of bad, such as the lack of care for the environment.
Beautiful segue.
I know. I love it. Yes. I mean, the best way to look after environment is through introducing the podcast, I think, is welcome to the Hospitality Chat podcast. My name is Mehdi Rahman, and I have my hosts, Joana Oliveira and Matthew Drummond-Poynter. And we're talking about what can restaurants do for the environment, And I think this is a bit of a talking topic, especially when we talk, it's in particular last year, where the talks of like the economical and the ecological battle to preserve the environment, looking after it, and with the talks that happened last year, was it the
COP26 summit, right? Yes.
Yeah, the COP26 summit. I mean, it was a while ago. It's still a relevant thing considering the impact that the world, the panini. Yes.
I will never tire of hearing this.
No, man.
Never.
No. Beautiful.
Yeah, the panini. Yes, the impact of the panini, happening, of course, was a lot of the damage caused by humans, or the energy that we produce, or the pollution that we produce, was healed over time as people went into lockdown and everything like that. Like we've seen, say a lot of seas or water, bodies of water being almost purified over time during the past year or so.
Yeah, no, I mean, with water, actually, the Thames in particular, I guess, of course, us all being London people here, has had a remarkable rate of recovery from like the Great Stink levels over time, and I think the in particular, sorry, panini, censor it, Daniel.
Yes, at the bleep, the censor bleep go,
Add a little panini in there.
I
too.
didn't know that,
But yeah, so between. Yeah, no. Like a while back, I think it was 1950s or something like that. The river was just ecologically dead. And nowadays, while it's still pretty bad, like there's obviously plenty of litter in there. The amount of wet wipes, in particular, in there is borderline disgusting. There's E. coli form bacteria all over the place, and the pH goes up and down quite a lot. It's starting to get far more stable. We're seeing kind of more neutral pH level there, and we're seeing stuff like fish, and even I believe a presence of a shark, was it a few months ago? Interesting. And yeah, I think
I'm shocked. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and I think a lot of that has to do with kind of like the lowering amounts of like litter in the river nowadays, which is great. And I think restaurants are have really played a part in all that, with cutting down, of course, on food waste and packaging wastage and stuff like that. We see restaurants nowadays kind of using a lot less kind of like plastic packaging and other like disposable single-use stuff, in favor of kind of like more compostable alternatives like paper or wood and such like. And all of these are definitely things that I'd be suggesting our listeners incorporate into their own restaurants if they kind of want to really kind of make an impact to the environment in that way. Getting rid of kind of like single-use plastics wherever possible is great, and it means that your kind of like waste isn't going to like hang around in the landfill or be littered and go into the environment and just stick around and kind of poison or choke a lot of like the animals in there and such like. And so yeah, in that kind of like reducing like plastic waste is an excellent example of how you can make real tangible effects on the environment through some relatively simple steps.
I mean, it does contain methane,
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes when I believe a UV light shines on plastics, it can actually release emissions too, actually. So it's cutting down your plastic is actually good for reducing your emissions. And that's not even counting, of course, because plastic's made from kind of processing like oil and oil and such like, it takes a lot of emissions to produce plastic as well. So again, by kind of cutting down the amount of single-use plastics you're using, you're not just reducing the amount of litter that ends up in the environment, you're also cutting down your emissions, which I'm sure we can all agree is excellent, given kind of like how we're kind of spiraling into this kind of climate death spiral almost, with the kind of emissions that we got, and we need really drastic action to kind of pick things up. And it's just a good way that kind of like we as like people and small business owners can kind of do our part in that way.
I mean, not only that as well, by making sure you reduce the amount of plastics here, when we talk about methane as well, it's a very harmful gas considering it can have more physiological damage as well as, the reduction amount of, reducing the amount of oxygen you breathe in the air as well, whether it causes mood changes, slurred speech, vision problems, and also even including nausea and vomit. And in severe cases, it can cause a change in breathing and heart rate and unconsciousness,
I'm gonna lie to you. I thought you were gonna say mutations.
No.
I was like, yeah, what?
No, not mutation. No, that would be horrible. Nausea and vomiting. But yeah, but it can has a cause of like heart rate problems, change in breathing, and over leading to stuff to be unconscious a lot of the time, being passed out by the high levels of methane in the air, and that could be the cause of food waste that is caused by the decomposition of food plastics or food waste in landfills.
Yeah, absolutely. When kind of like food like decomposes and such like, it releases methane and other such emissions. And methane in particular can be quite dire, because methane particle per particle is actually way worse for warming effects than CO2. It's just we produce way more CO2 than methane. So yeah, that can be pretty bad. And it's not like there aren't ways that restaurants can kind of reduce the amount of food waste that they're producing. You can kind of like make sure that you kind of use as much of it as possible by a careful managing of your expiry date. So you kind of use the food that's close to expiring first, in order to make sure that you don't just have food expiring constantly and have to throw that out. Then it rots, produces emissions, so on and so forth. Also, of course, that waste actually has to be kind of transported to kind of landfills and such like. So you've got like transport costs, because of course those trucks aren't exactly running on clean energy sources either. Which again compounds kind of the amount of emissions you're producing. Other ways that you can kind of like reduce your food waste in that capacity would be kind of like you can obviously use it as composting, which you kind of still got the rotting effect, but you're at least getting something out of it. So you could use it in kind of like a restaurant garden if you have one, or you can like get in touch with like kind of like local community gardeners or something, get in touch with them and kind of like see if they wouldn't be opposed to like taking some of that compost. You can bet they'll probably have use for it. This is kind of great because it means you can kind of like reuse it, but also it's just great for kind of building those kind of like community ties. We see a lot of these in the community environmental projects. They're really good at kind of bringing the community together in that fashion, like similarly how community like litter picks, you see like local companies like helping out in that regard, and it's just great for building like a stronger sense of community, and a stronger sense of community might bring more business to your restaurant too. So it's just kind of win-win in that respect. Other way you can get rid of food waste would be to get in touch with like other people who could use it, like if it's not quite expired yet and still safe for human consumption, you could kind of like donate it to like one of those services which kind of like feeds like the homeless and the hungry and such like. I believe there's some supermarkets that do something similar to that one, or you can get it, or you can get in touch with farmers, because of course, like feeding pigs and such. Like I believe Ben & Jerry's does something where they kind of like all their like leftover ice cream or something they feed to get in touch and feed it to pigs or something like that. Though I'm maybe regurgitating false information there. Who knows? And yeah, again. And yeah, again, that's and yeah, again, that's just it might be discarded products of ice cream. I'd search it up, but weird filming.
Sick, though.
That would be that'd be very trippy,
I mean, they do eat anything. Like porks eat anything, so I wouldn't be surprised if they like ice cream. It's just crazy that he said they would just give ice cream to pigs.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
Yeah, no, they do. Just
I
got to
mean,
just pull up source that says to do it. And yeah, and again, that's kind of like a way that you can kind of reuse your food waste to make use of something that otherwise you'd just be throwing away, going to landfills, producing emissions. In that way, you're kind of like helping close the circle, reuse, recycle, and just generally, it's going to make a far more positive effect on the environment.
and not only that, there are tools you can do, like a digital inventory management tool, to reduce food waste. A lot of them will rely on, say, the latest tech to help manage and organize their produce and products in the restaurant to make sure that when the restaurant owners would want to reduce that food waste, they would keep on track of it, and they'll have constant alerts, or say notifications that their items that they registered into their system is almost near expiration, so they can decide on the immediate actions like you propose to do, put stickers on the use by dates or donate the surplus foods.
Yeah, no, exactly. Also on the topic of surplus foods and leftovers, some kind of like, like small little bits of food when you're like preparing stuff that you would throw away, you might actually be able to use you could kind of like use like leftover vegetables from previous stuff that it's previous meals that you've prepared in order to chuck them into like a broth or something like that in order to kind of like reuse them in that way. Obviously, don't do that with rotting food. And overripe fruits can actually be used to kind of put in baked goods if you kind of like have stations for that one. Because their overripe fruits actually are often really sweet, so they're actually often really good for baked goods in that respect.
And it'd be very cool for restaurants, especially when they kind of use environmentally friendly restaurant, but also in the sense of like gaining positive press and exposure, as well as, having a good positive brand imagery for your restaurant would be to use, say, donate when in terms of donations as well. Could do like a soup kitchen style kind of like help for like, a restaurant organize like a soup kitchen style service where they provide food for the homeless. And I think when we look into like when it says, I'm kind of like thinking about that time where I went to the Gurdwara, I think Sikhism, kind of
Mhm.
like, when they kind of like the langar, for example, I think in Sikhism, they kind of give food, regardless of anyone of any faith, they treat people equally and kind of serve people for all kind of backgrounds. And I think when I learned about this as well, when I was doing my work at uni, for like a documentary kind of website project I was doing about the Sikhism belief. I mean, it's very more complicated than I thought it'd be, but I won't get into that. But basically, the idea of langar, the practices, to be of, to make sure it's to help run it, help look after people. I think it's a way of restaurants could take that kind of examples of everyday beliefs and faiths as well as practices, and it could help with like, and not only that, it's also environmentally friendly in terms of like, rather than throwing away the stuff that's going to be near, but could be at their almost prime with when it's ripe, it's able to use it for other things like, say, donations or soup kitchen style services.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that sounds like an excellent way to get positive press. And I think there's a lot of positive press to kind of be gained in general from being environmentally friendly. We're kind of increasingly environmentally conscious. I believe over 60% of UK citizens now believe that climate change is a severe threat. So uh, there's a lot of people who agree about this, and I think a lot of people want to do something about this. And I think the idea of like ethically kind of dining in that respect is something that a lot of people really yearn for. So it's definitely a good opportunity to get like a increase in publicity and like footfall in your restaurant, as kind of like we become more increasingly alarmed by the state of climate change and want to do something to help. In terms of other ways that restaurants can kind of like cut down on their like environmental impact, of course, energy efficiency is actually a good one to go about doing things. Perhaps doubly so pressing in the recent news regarding energy price rises. So it's also a way to
Yeah,
kind of cut down on your bills and such like. And these can be really simple things like making sure your appliances are energy efficient, perhaps upgrading them if you've kind of been meaning to do that for a while to like more energy efficient ones. Um, Using LED lights can be quite good because they're generally more energy efficient than traditional bulbs. You can get motion sensors in like the bathrooms and such like, so that the lights go off when no one's in there, because otherwise you kind of just got lights on in there when you don't need them at all. Um,
yeah.
on the topic of appliances as well, actually, of course, make sure that you maintain your appliances regularly, because a poorly maintained appliance is often going to require more energy to do its task. Like, let's say a kind of badly maintained oven is going to take longer and longer to kind of heat up to the point where it can properly cook food, which means you're kind of wasting energy to get there. Meanwhile, if you maintained it better, it would do its job better. You'd use less energy, lowering your environmental impact, but also saving you a lot of money in the process.
I agree, yeah.
And not only that, you have to, and also when it comes to cleaning your appliances, you have to make sure that your cleaning routines are also green. Considering, like, the normal cleaning like the conventional cleaning products, will have more more heavier and harsh chemicals. Like, they don't really break down that well, and if anything, it would add more pollution to the air or water supply or the water table. If you know, like your
Yeah.
water become like a lot of water become more alkaline and almost like to the point where it becomes unsuitable for human use, if you'd say. So, and not only that, the smell of bleach, I mean, it does get a bit sickly after a while when you smell it more and more.
True.
Yeah, definitely. On the topic of water, actually, of course, in terms of water usage, there's also some good avenues for restaurants to kind of manage their water usage. Um, just little things like getting your kind of water saving stuff when necessary. Like, you can get like water saving urinals and such like. I believe McDonald's does something similar. You can kind of like get these kind of like water heating devices that actually use solar power rather and heat from the sun to kind of like try and heat some of your water up. It probably won't replace like all of your water heating electricity, but it will
But
definitely
you take a good
mitigate
chunk
it.
out of it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
I mean, not only
yeah, I
that,
think. Oh, hang on, sorry.
sorry, but not only that as well, you can use a lot. I think it should be more pushed to use biodegradable products, I think, instead, because a lot of them are like they would break down much more easily. With even with like say some people like they develop like plastic bags where they kind of almost like they biodegradable. They don't after they can be reused, but after a certain time, instead of them being like rotting away and being whole in the landfill side, they could be more just eating away through its by the material alone.
Yeah, like the paper bags and the paper straws is what people have been doing for a while now. Either that or they use steel. So you use like a reusable straw.
Yeah.
So you use steel instead. But um, either or, I think it helps. I think there's a lot of people that prefer using steel. There's one for the turtles to save the turtles. I don't know the actual name for it, but I think there's a charity to save the turtles, and they tell you to use steel straws, the reusable ones. I have some somewhere. I need to get more, but they're really helpful, honestly. Especially when you do takeout and they give you paper straws, and if something happens to your drinks, like if there was a spillage or whatever, your paper straw is now gone, and you have no straw. So steel
Yeah.
straws are one of the better shouts for you to use. Obviously, you can't. Well, you could have that in restaurants, but I think it would be a bit of money to have that and reuse and clean and do all of that.
No doubt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Obviously, yeah, you got to keep in mind, like, when considering sustainable alternatives, what if you're not increasing your like energy costs or water usage in this particular example, in other areas, which would kind of possibly nullify
Yeah.
the effect of the environment you're trying to have. But yeah, paper straws are fine for restaurants. They're disposable, they biodegrade, so they break down and rot a bit, which is obviously, you're getting rotting emissions, but I think it's fair to say that it's far lower than the emissions produced by the creation of plastic and the actual effect of having plastic just permanently around in like the environment, choking animals to death and all that stuff, and getting microplastics into our water supply, which is to no one's benefit, really.
Yeah. And not only that as
Yeah.
well. And not only that as well. In relation to like the amount of plastic we use to try to cut down on it, it's better to reuse, recycle a lot of the material that is end up being single used.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we kind of like see quite a lot of this, right? In terms of like coffee shops do like cups, which you can kind of like buy off them, and then you can just keep bring it back to them to fill up, as opposed to like getting like disposable cups over and over again and throwing them away and that kind of stuff. In terms of other things that restaurants could do to kind of like replace single-use stuff with more reusable, when creating like when using like sauces or something, switching to kind of like a big old like actually like glass or dispenser or something that customers kind of like use and then go away, and then you can just keep filling that up as opposed to like lots of single-use sachets, is another way of kind of like cutting down on the waste that you produce.
And no doubt as well, a lot of coffee shops do this a lot, where when you're like bring your own coffee cup here, you get like a discount for every cup your own cup you use for the coffees that you buy in, like say Starbucks or Costas and whatnot. A lot of places are already using these tactics to encourage more customers to reuse and recycle by offering them cheaper discounts. I think you have to offer an incentive, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Offering incentives is an excellent way to kind of like get customers on board, especially if you kind of want to cut down on how much your customers kind of use this stuff. So yeah, positive incentives like discounts for using the kind of like cut for life, that kind of thing, is an excellent way to kind of entice your customer base in and reduce the overall footprint of your kind of business in that sense. And also, cheaper drinks might, of course, just entice customers over anyway, because cheaper drinks are cheaper drinks.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to just like use your own cup and have a nice kind of cup of coffee, but not worrying about having any sense of damage or having no kind of impact on the environment. And not only that, and what I was thinking about as well is when we think about also the food, you have to also think about the entire service. When you talk about the interior design, the design of your restaurant, I think it is really cool. I don't know if they can able to do it, but it depends on the budget of each individual restaurant. But building a sustainable dining room would be very cool. Just to like say use stuff from the local area rather than going out to an entire, kind of like an entire supplier. Like we say, be strategic about shipping, where a lot of the vendors need to make sure to reduce the fuel emissions in the area. They would reduce their shipments to at least once per week. And as long as and when we talked about before about learning your market and learn your area, once you know the kind of idea that the amount of people who come into your restaurant on a weekly basis, make sure you put your shipments at least once per week in order to tackle, not to be part of the problem of fuel emissions in the area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about like sourcing like dining room stuff from local people, and actually that's an excellent point. Like sourcing your ingredients from kind of local farmers is another excellent way to cut down on emissions in that sense. Because of course, if you're sourcing them from like further away, it takes longer to transport. Those transports are going to be burning a hell of a lot of CO2 on the way there, and so by just shortening the amount of distance to your to the people you're sourcing the ingredients from, it means that you're going to be producing less emissions from your suppliers, and just generally, it's also probably going to be more economical for you in the long run, because you don't have the higher transport costs. Of course, you could also try growing some of your own ingredients, which would, of course, cut those transport costs to exactly zero and enable you to use some of your rotting food as compost, like we talked about earlier. But I understand that not every business owner has time to do stuff like that. When doing environmental policy, you've always got to take into account if you can actually do it. But even, yeah, just sourcing stuff from like more local farmers and such like is an excellent way to kind of like cut down your emissions, and also kind of like people love like kind of like the image of like getting from local farmers and local producers and such like, because it kind of like raises the perceived authenticity of your food. So again, it's a win-win from both avenues.
I mean,
It's like about like I was gonna say friendship. Well, technically, it would be like a friendship partnership. It's about helping each other out, small business helping small business out with farmers and restaurants. Um, it just make everything better. And if it helps to be eco-friendly, then even better. Like you said, it's like a win-win for all of them.
I mean, when you talk about kind of like the community being the support for the restaurant as well. Like it can, like you can consider doing composting, and I mean, a lot of restaurants would be very looked upon like, oh, having their own outdoor garden. They use that outdoor garden of their restaurant to build their compost. But also, if not, they can always donate to like a to a community garden. And I think when every day when I go for my time at secondary school, I always go past I go to like school, and when we're heading towards we always go through these two alleyways. And when we go through these two alleyways, I don't know, this pathway, in both sides of us is our community garden, and I always see people from the community take part in like gardening the local area, and also a very has like they would say a new nutrient rich compost. They always like their own kind of gardening. And I remember kids from the local schools would go by and visiting the community gardens, and I think utilizing the community, like using the community gardens and supporting them through by donations of like to use for like food-based waste for the fertilization process of the community gardens. I think going green is such a symbiotic way of like maintaining a relationship between everyone in the community. Like you help them and they help you.
And it's pretty easy to do compost. Obviously, like Mehdi said, is like food I don't use, but even eggshells are great for composting plants. My grandma used to put eggshells on the plants, and it would help them grow. Somehow the plants would eat away at the shells because they're great nutrients. So anything that you would throw away, you can legit use it for growing something else. It's very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, eggshells are also an excellent deterrent for slugs and snails and such. Like if you scatter them around them, we over here use our eggshells in that way quite a lot of the time. And also, as you say, it's just it helps plants grow. So yeah, I think that's an excellent example of how kind of like the waste you use is actually each bit of it, no matter how kind of insignificant or useless it seems, is actually often incredibly useful in some aspect or another. On the topic of kind of like techniques related to gardening and farming, of course, another way that you can kind of like work with your supplier to kind of like get cut down your environmental impact would be to kind of like look at like organic foods and organic farming methods. We talked about this a bit in an earlier podcast, but organic farming methods often don't use a lot of like the heavy man-made fertilizers and other such aspects, which can cause environmental damage to like local water sources through eutrophication and other aspects of just poisoning like the local environment, pesticide usage, killing like local wildlife and such like. So if you can kind of source your food from organic farmers, then you can actually cut down on your environmental impact again, and also you get to say, oh, this was sourced from organic farming methods, which again is just another like advertising feather in your cap there. Again, I think there's a real theme actually of like a lot of like environmental kind of like things that you do actually can also serve as a really good way of kind of like signaling to authenticity and ethics to your customers in a way that brings in more customers and kind of reinforces a really nice positive brand image and kind of like these local community ties.
Not only that as well, I think in relation to like organic produces as well, I think another alternative measure, like it's not going to be for everyone. It depends on the direction you have for your restaurant, whether it's taking to like the vegan approach as well, like reducing meat on your menu. Like as noted down as well, meat can disproportionately cause environmental damage compared to vegan alternatives. And it can be a result to say, it can be broken down to say deforestation, emissions, and water pollution.
Absolutely, yeah. Just to I guess to start things off by touching on the deforestation angle, because animals, of course, animals don't just have to be like don't just need one patch of land. They need another patch of land in order to grow the feed for them. They're remarkably inefficient in terms of kind of like getting food on the table with a low environmental impact, because this means you're going to need to clear more land for fields, which oft times is forest. Of course, we've all seen like the result increasing damage to the Amazon in order to make way for land to grow food for livestock, particularly I think soybeans. And so this kind of like results in not only the loss of habitats for like the local wildlife and such like, which is terrible of its own accord, but in terms of like this also has knock-on effects on emissions because you're getting rid of a load of trees which are excellent carbon sinks, and which normally would be kind of helping counteract the effects of global warming. You're just eliminating them from the equation if you're clearing that land for farm. Also, the predominant method of kind of like getting rid of these forests is controlled burning. So you
I
aren't
don't
just
know
getting rid
why.
of the carbon sinks, you're releasing all the carbon they're sinking back into the atmosphere, making things 10 times worse.
Why does it have to be burning? It makes no sense. Already cutting them down is worse, so it was already bad. Now controlled burning. What kind of what kind of thing is that?
It's cheap and easy.
Oh,
I believe is the
bro.
primary reason. Then the removal of these trees actually also, not only in terms of carbon sinks, actually damages the soil in the area because tree roots are really integral to kind of like this health of soil because their roots will often like hold the soil together. And kind of shield it from like torrential downpours and rain and such like. With them no longer able to do that, it means that not only does they're not shielded, so the sun dries it out and then the rain starts to scatter it, and it gets scattered really easily now because there's no roots holding the soil together. So this kind of eventually spirals into the point where it's kind of like a dust bowl. And it's a lot of kind of like how like desertification and stuff can spread across like forests in that respect. So again, you're just kind of like helping the environment out altogether if you kind of like cut down the amount of like meat you're using because you're going to be cutting down on the amount of land that needs to be cleared for the farms required to just grow your food rather than growing more food to feed to animals which need their own field cleared and so on and so forth. Also, in terms of emissions, of course, livestock are pretty bad for emissions. They produce large quantities of methane when they digest foods, which we've already talked about the dangers of too many methane emissions, both in terms of like the effect they have on the global warming, but also in terms of the effect that it can have on people if it's really heavy. This was also true of animal manure, which again it releases emissions as it starts to decay. And again, this kind of like spirals into like creating a worse kind of like global warming environment. In fact, so terrible that the meat industry produces about 60% of food-based greenhouse gases and 14.5% of all global emissions, full stop, which is pretty impressive. Lastly, going on to the water pollution angle, livestock manure obviously contains all kinds of harmful pathogens, E. coli, salmonella, all that kind of stuff. And
All
when
the fun
rain,
stuff.
yep, and rain can then rain can then wash that into like local water sources further down the water table, and this will then kind of like pollute that water source, make it hazardous for humans and animals to drink, and so again you're just causing a knock-on effect on the entire environment. Also, because of course animals are also thirsty buggers and require twice as much in terms of water sources as just farming veg. They're going to need a lot more water. This leads to overexploitation of water sources, can cause them to dry out, which then requires you to go find another water source where you then overexploit that, dry it out, so on and so forth. And of course, each time one of these water sources is overexploited, it ruins the local ecosystem.
So basically, it's a domino effect.
Exactly, it's a domino effect.
I mean, the harm that we have into the environment is a one big domino effect where it will soon end up leading to the loss of life eventually, you know, of this planet. Because, and I think that's the way to, I kind of like know what I would want to say. I think the end of this podcast, the message of it is what we do to the environment will have a knock-off effect from maybe not now, but maybe in the future, and we'll be responsible for the struggles and the turmoils that the future generation will have because we were careless right now to the environment.
It's
And
the
I think,
thing of like, oh, we don't have to deal with it, so we're gonna do it now. But then generations in the future have to deal with the domino effect that we did while we were on Earth. Because I'm pretty sure we're not gonna feel the the pollution effect. Well, maybe we are. There's already some pretty horrible stuff happening, but not as much as our future generations will if we keep going this direction. I think that's the reason why I'm kind of gonna go off topic. They got electric cars, so the gasoline and the petrol wouldn't damage the ozone. But still, I think we're still a long, long time away from making everything in the planet green to help, especially with the deforestation in the Amazon, taking out the oxygen left that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's we can take actions now to maybe improve things decades down the line, like we talked about at the very start of this podcast. In fact, with the Thames kind of slowly improving over time, and I think that's why it's so critical that restaurants kind of make these steps now, because by
Yeah.
making these steps now down the line, maybe we can slow down things, help alleviate things, and perhaps one day even be looking at a recovery. Though I wouldn't expect that to happen for
Yeah,
decades.
a long time. Yeah.
But in this way, it's an excellent tool for restaurants to not only improve their public standing, but also your legacy as a restaurant. You might be, if you're being like a future risk taker in this one, taking these measures in advance, you might be remembered ages down the line as as a kind of like example of a restaurant that really kind of like pushed the bounds of these things and kind of like would forward thinking in that respect. It's an excellent opportunity to do some improve an aspect which I don't think you have kind of much of an opportunity to normally.
I think the way to make sure is, I think from touching what both of you said, is we are right now we're responsible for the next generation on how they would live based off how we live our lives right now, and I think we got a responsibility to make sure that when all is said and when all is said and done at the end of our lives, we want to make sure that what we leave behind is a world that they can help live in and improve further. I think you all want to strive for improvement and recovery, and I think that's a part of a process of living, is to improve and recover. And for that, we should improve and recover in the lives that we lead, but also the place that we're living in this world. And that's pretty much my end of message of the podcast.
It's a good
Yeah.
ending.
Yeah, I know,
Lovely.
right? I know.
I guess it's my turn. It's my turn to do it, I guess, this time. We hope you enjoyed the podcast today. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment if you've got any of your suggestions of your own in regards to how restaurants can improve their thing. Make sure to bang that bell for the notifications. And if you're interested in seeing like more and detailed methods of how to improve your own restaurant, head over to orderpin.co.uk/blog in the climate change section for an excellent array of blogs and ideas regarding how you as a restaurant can improve your own environmental impact, as well as any other tips regarding business management.
And for that, I say thank you and goodbye. And this is the Hospitality Chat podcast. And take care.